Hello everyone. Today we are going to see how to crack JIPMAT. My name is Alpesh and I am going to help you in strategizing the JIPMAT exam. Before we start with anything, let us look at the agenda for the video. First thing, we will try to see what is the previous year's test pattern. Then we will see the cutoff for JIPMAT. Then we will strategize how to prepare and look at the ideal attempts in the test. And finally, I'll give you an overall prep strategy. So let us start with the test paper pattern. Now, if you look at JIPMAT over the years has the same pattern, at least in the last 2 to 3 years. Okay, so if you look at the sections, we get 3 sections. Cont has 33 questions, LR has 33 questions, and verbal has 34 questions. So if you check, you have a total of 100 questions and you have 2.5 hours. That means 150 minutes to attempt this 100 questions. Now, first thing, 150 minutes, 100 questions. That means, can I say I have roughly 1.5 minutes per question, which if I try to compare it with the other entrance test, wherein I get on an average 1 or lesser than 1 minute to attempt a question. Here I am getting 1.5 minutes to attempt the question. So please remember, JIPMAT is not a speed-based test. Hence, this is a test where accuracy is very, very important. So I have talked with lots of students and I have seen that majority of the students are able to attempt all the 100 questions. So if you look at the test also, I have 150 minutes, 100 questions. Verbal has 34 questions. So even on an average, if you take 1 minute per question, you will take 34 to 35 minutes for verbal. Okay, LR has 33 questions. Again, on an average, I feel 35 to max 40 minutes. So let's say 40 minutes for LR, 35 minutes for verbal, that makes it 75. That means you have 75 minutes on an average for 33 questions for Cont. This shows that you have on an average 2 minutes per question for Cont. So you should be looking at attempting majority of the questions in this given test. As I said, this is a test of accuracy and not speed. For every correct answer, you will get +4, and for every wrong answer, 1 mark will be deducted. Again, another important thing, there is no sectional time limit for this test. So you have a complete 150 minutes and you have the complete 100 questions with you at a given point of time. So you can shift whenever you want to from one section to another section. Though I wouldn't suggest that you keep jumping from section to sections, but this is a possibility. Another very important thing to be remembered here is the test has very less sectional cutoffs. Now, what do I mean by very less sectional cutoffs? So let us look at the cutoffs of JIPMAT the previous year, that means for 2023. As you can see on the screen, for a general category student, it was a cutoff of 35 marks for Cont, 65 for DILR and 85 for verbal. However, on a total, you had to score 342. So you can say that this is next to not having a sectional cutoffs at all. Okay, what you need to make sure is you maximize your attempts. Okay, so as you can see, the cutoff for the general category student was a 342. That means if I have to come anywhere close to 342 marks, make sure that you attempt all the 100 questions, and it is a possibility. So your aim should be to solve all the 100 questions with around 90% of accuracy. So if you solve around 100 questions with 90% accuracy, I'm sure you will come close to 342 or score more than 342. Now, let's look at the strategy to prepare for JIPMAT. The first thing, as I already told you, this is an exam of accuracy. So focus on your areas of strength. Try to identify which are your strong areas. Keep practicing on them and make sure that those questions are definitely attempted in the test. This does not mean that we will leave out on the weaker sections. Identify your weaker sections also and start working on them so that they come more closer towards your stronger area. As I already said, the target has to be 350 plus. And to get a target of 350 plus, An ideal attempt, as I said here, would be attempting all the questions. And as I said earlier also, majority of the students land up solving most of the questions given in the test. Time is not that much of a factor. Okay. So let's look at the prep plan for the cont section. So these are the distribution of questions from the last year JIPMAT. So you had approximately 7 questions from geometry and mensuration, 6 questions from number system. The number system included number of factors of a given number. Then, it included HCF, LCM, questions on applications of LCMs and so on. Algebra had 6 questions that included a couple of questions on functions and so on. Permutation combination probability had 4 questions with more of probability. Arithmetic had 6 questions including time, speed, distance, time and work and so on. Modern maths had 2 questions which was simply a Venn diagram question, and trigonometry again 2 questions. Okay, so another important thing, as you can see from here, identify the topics which has maximum weightage. So even if I look at the last to last year JIPMAT distribution, it is roughly the same. Okay, so try to identify. So plus or minus 1 or 2 questions here and there will happen. Okay, so that should not be a concern. Identify which areas are important. As you can see, geometry is important, number system is important, algebra is important. That constitutes almost 19 out of 33 questions. Make sure that you definitely have good concepts in this area. Again, if you look at maximum questions, the maximum number of questions here are relatively easier. There were 3 or 4 time-consuming questions, but as I said, they are time-consuming. They were not difficult. Maybe they were little longer to read. They were little calculation-oriented. Okay, but that was only 3 or 4 questions. Majority of the questions were very, very easy. So let's look at the English section. So if I look at the English section, the distribution last year was, there was only one RC passage and that had 4 questions in them. If I look at the other type of questions, you get parajumbles, you had active and passive voice, direct indirect speech, spotting the error, antonym synonyms, and filling the blank types of questions. So if I keep the reading comprehension aside, do you realize most of your questions are vocab and grammar based? So make sure that you have your grammar rules studied properly. Start reading vocab books if you want to. Get into a habit of learning 20 to 30 words on a daily basis. If you do that, I'm sure majority of the vocab questions will be taken care of. Again, the type of questions that have been coming in the last 2 to 3 years, they have been relatively easier. Hence, attempting all the questions is a possibility. Let's look at the DI and the LR section. As you can see, there were 3 sets of DI. 2 were tabular based, 1 was pie diagram based. The distribution of these 3 sets was, one table had 4 questions, the pie diagram had 3 questions, and the second tabular data had 2 questions. Last to last year, there were 15 questions on DI. Okay, but last year there were only 9 questions on DI. So as I said, your strategy for DI would remain more or less same. So whenever you are preparing for DI, realize that what you need to do is make sure that your concepts on percentages, averages, and profit and loss, this are very, very clear. Even ratios, averages, and so on. Okay, try to get those concepts right. Thereafter, what I would suggest is simply practice. Practice as much as you can. Solve around 10 sets of DI, maybe 5 of table, 5 of pie diagram. You can also do bar chart, though it has been missing, but it's better to practice those type. Okay. Again, then if I look at the other type of questions, you have analogy, coding, decoding, series completion, questions on blood relations, questions on directions, even Venn diagram comes here. Also, there are verbal reasoning questions amounting to total of 12 out of 33. The verbal reasoning questions that you get are basically antonyms, synonyms, or not antonyms, synonyms. It could be syllogs based. It could be argument based. Okay, it could be statement and conclusion based, and so on. So these are the verbal reasoning questions that you get. Okay. Overall, again, if you look at the type of questions that you get, it is going to be relatively easy. Okay, so this section, the LR section, is actually considered to be a scoring section. So make sure that you attempt maximum questions in this area. So let us now look at the prep plan overall. First thing, what are you supposed to do? Identify the areas that you need to work on. Clear the concepts of each and every area. Okay, then solve benchmarking tests. Now, what are benchmarking tests? So I take a very simple example. Let's say I'm doing permutation combination. I do the concepts of PNC. I solve the benchmarking tests. That will give me an additional practice on PNC. Okay, once I'm sure that I'm getting good marks in my benchmarking test, then I go on to the next topic. Okay, keep doing this for every topic, be it cont, be it verbal, be it LR. Okay, pick up a particular topic, do the concepts of that, then solve the benchmarking test. Once you are confident that you have done good enough in your benchmarking test, move on to the second topic. Then, once after you have completed your concepts, start taking the sim JIPMATs. Now, my suggestion would be you should take a minimum of 5 JIPMATs. Okay, do a little bit of trial and error maybe in the first 2 JIPMATs to identify what strategy you would be looking at. Now, when I say what strategy, meaning should you start with LR, then move on to verbal and then move on to cont, or should you start with cont, then move on to LR and then verbal. So do a little bit of trial and error maybe in 1 or 2 mocks and then finalize your strategy, and with that strategy make sure you take at least 3 mocks. Okay, so start taking mocks after you have completed your concepts. Now, one more thing to be remember, just do not take mocks. Okay, always get into the habit of analyzing the mocks so that you know what kind of errors you are doing. Okay, so identify the mistakes that you are doing in the mocks and make sure that you do not do the same mistakes in the next mocks. Another important thing that I would suggest you to do is solve on a daily basis, maybe around 30 questions from cont, 35 questions from LR, 40 questions from verbal. Get into that habit of solving this many number of questions on a daily basis. Don't get stuck up with doing a complete cont on one day, doing a complete LR on the second day, maybe doing a complete verbal on one particular day. No. Try to mix match between 3 topics. If not, at least 2 topics is what I would suggest. So, I hope this has helped you in your preparation for JIPMAT. All the best for the test.